Paintings by Rembrandt, Vermeer, Manet, and Degas, 13 works of art in total, vanished without a trace in March 1990. The thieves stole these valuable masterpieces from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, leaving behind almost no clues. The total value of the stolen artworks is estimated to exceed $500 million, making this one of the most notorious crimes in the art world. Even 35 years later, no one knows where the paintings by these great artists are. Why did the museum guard let the criminals inside the building? This is a recording from an American news broadcast from half a century ago. Live on air, the anchor presents the work of a great Renaissance genius. In December 1973, Jim Huff brought a portrait of an old woman into the studio. The man claimed to have found the artwork in a barn. His story caused a sensation on the air. Just a few days earlier, the painting had been stolen. On December 18, 1973 at 2 a.m., two criminals wearing ski masks entered the Taft Museum of Art in Cincinnati, Ohio. They tied up the guard and stole two Rembrandt paintings, portrait of an old woman and man, leaning on a windowsill valued at $83,000 to $250,000. The FBI and Interpol immediately launched a search for the masterpieces, fearing that the Dutch artist's work would be smuggled out of the country. However, less than 24 hours after the robbery, Jim Huff called John Warrington, the head of the Taft Museum's Board of Trustees. Huff claimed to know the location of the stolen paintings. He said the thieves had contacted him and were willing to return the artworks under certain conditions. He offered himself as a mediator in the negotiations for a fee of $15,000. The criminals promised to give him one painting, the portrait of an old woman, to prove they had the artworks, while the second painting would be returned only in exchange for money. The thieves indeed handed over the portrait of an old woman. This is how the painting appeared on the news, and later ended up with the police. However, they demanded $200,000 for the second canvas. If they didn't receive the money, they threatened to douse it in gasoline and burn it. The price was negotiated down to half. At the arranged location, Jim Huff left suitcases of money for the criminals. 3 gang members were caught red-handed, and the mastermind of the robbery, Donald Lee Johnson, was arrested later. All were sentenced to prison, including Jim Huff, who turned out to be an accomplice. However, this was not the end of the story of Portrait of an Old Woman. Researchers from the Rembrandt Research Project analyzed the stolen paintings and discovered that the portrait of an old woman was neither painted by Rembrandt nor by his students. The real portrait of an old woman is actually kept in the State Hermitage Museum. Moreover, the painting was created not in 1669, but 15 years earlier. Still, this is just one of many cases of Rembrandt thefts. Criminals have a particular interest in the Dutch master's work. His paintings have long topped the ranking of the most stolen artworks. It is believed that Rembrandt's paintings have been stolen 81 times. However, this number is somewhat uncertain, partly because some stolen works later turned out to be either by his students or outright forgeries. Nevertheless, the number 81 is officially cited in the 2012 book Stolen Rembrandts, written by journalist Tom Ashberg and Anthony Amore, head of security at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. Amore personally investigated the notorious crime known as the heist of the century. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum robbery on the night of March 17th to 18th, 1990 remains one of the largest unsolved crimes in U.S. history. Here's how it happened. At night, a car pulled up to the museum. The thieves, dressed as police officers, told the guards they had a warrant for their arrest. Then they stole the paintings. The criminals acted quickly and efficiently. They roughly cut or tore the canvases from their frames. A total of 13 world-renowned masterpieces were taken, worth over $500 million. The investigation quickly hit a dead end. The thieves also took the museum's security footage. The police were unable to identify the criminals. They examined footprints, fingerprints, DNA from hair samples, and microscopic particles, but could not determine whether they belonged to the criminals, museum staff, or visitors. Nearly 25 years later, FBI officials announced that they had finally identified the perpetrators. They claimed the Boston mafia was behind the heist. However, by that time, the alleged participants had already died. The location of the stolen paintings remains unknown to this day. The stolen works included 3 Rembrandts: Self-Portrait, A Lady and Gentleman in Black, and Christ in the Storm on the Sea of Galilee. Also stolen was Vermeer's The Concert, a unique painting. The museum walls where they once hung remain empty to this day, because there is still hope that the paintings will one day be recovered. Meanwhile, one stolen Rembrandt was eventually recovered, portrait of Jacob de Gouin III. This painting from Dulwich Picture Gallery in London has been stolen 4 times and recovered each time. Because of this, it has earned the nickname Takeaway Rembrandt. After the third theft, the museum upgraded its security and practically bolted the painting to the wall. But even that didn't stop the next thieves. They broke into the gallery through the ceiling and pried the portrait off the wall with a crowbar. Despite the police arriving 5 minutes after the alarm was triggered, the criminals escaped. The painting was only recovered 3 years later thanks to an anonymous tip. In November 2015, criminals once again tried to steal the takeaway Rembrandt, but this time police reacted swiftly, and they failed. After all these incidents, the painting earned a spot in the Guinness Book of Records as the most stolen painting in the world. It remains in the Dulwich Picture Gallery, reportedly under heavy security. Another Rembrandt painting changed museums after a theft. This heist took place on Easter night in Moscow on April 24, 1927. 5 masterpieces, including Christ with folded arms, were stolen from the Pushkin Museum. The thief took advantage of the fact that a church service was happening nearby. As the church bells rang loudly, he broke a window and entered the museum. The painting was found 4 years later in terrible condition. The thief had buried the canvas in the ground like a vandal. After restoration, the painting never returned to the Pushkin Museum. The Soviet government sold it abroad and it ended up in the Van Diemen Gallery in Berlin. Many people wonder, why do criminals target Rembrandt's paintings so often? The answer is simple. On one hand, he was a prolific artist with over 2,000 paintings and sketches. On the other hand, his works are small, making them easy to transport. Thieves choose paintings based either on a specific order or their market value. And we know that a Rembrandt painting can sell for tens of millions of dollars, all while taking up little space. Experts say that tracking down paintings that end up on the black market can take decades. If a stolen masterpiece ends up in private collections, finding it becomes nearly impossible. Thieves often threaten to destroy stolen artworks, but in reality, this rarely happens. Still, no one can predict what criminals will do next. Investigators are still unable to determine the fate of 7 paintings from the Kunsthal Museum in the Netherlands, worth 200 million euros. In 2012, works by Matisse, Picasso, Gauguin, Monet, and Freud were stolen from a museum in Rotterdam in just 3 minutes. Their fate remains unknown,